The typical Christian would describe a stage, a microphone, a band, and a surge of emotion rising in a dark room if you ask them to define worship. They would explain the sensation that results from 1,000 voices rising in unison as the chorus grows. Furthermore, they would be discussing something that the Bible never refers to as worship. The meaning of the word you have sang your entire life is not what you believe it to be. That might sound startling, but bear with me, since this is
millions of Christians' entire spiritual lives have been subtly influenced by a single misunderstanding. In the New Testament, the Greek word for worship appears more than 60 times. It's the word proskuneo, and it has very little to do with music. Singing is not what it means. In front of someone much bigger than yourself, it means to bow down, fall on your face, and kiss the earth. It conveys respect, submission, and the complete surrender of your entire existence. Worship. It is not a song you sing in the language of Scripture. It's a position you adopt. This is the bit that hurts subtly. For years, a lot of earnest believers gauge their level of faith by how they feel while the music is playing. They question whether something is amiss with them as the emotion wanes. Chasing an experience they were never supposed to have in church, they leave empty-handed because the true meaning of the word was never explained to them. This is what a lot of Christians overlook. It was never intended for worship to be limited to a structure, a Sunday, or a melody. It was intended to take on the exact form of your life, a life of calm surrender that lasts long after the last note has faded, one that is bowed low and laid down. In one remarkable exchange with a woman at a well in John 4:24, Jesus disclosed precisely that. He said, "God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." We will discover the true meaning of those words and the reasons they alter everything over the course of the following few minutes. If your heart yearns, please take a moment to subscribe and accompany me on this journey if you want to worship God as the Bible truly describes. Before we start, please leave a comment below explaining what you always thought worship was. Together, let's find the solution. Let's start where all sincere discussions on worship must start, the term itself. Because everything we have built on top of the Nord starts to wobble if it does not signify what you have always been told. This is what ought to disturb us. The apostles used this word for worship most frequently. The modern church has all but forgotten the meaning of the same word that fell from Jesus' mouth. Every Sunday, we still say it, but the picture that was hidden there has been lost. It was never about an emotion that surges during a chorus. It was about a person who lowers themselves, a body that submits, and a heart that fully gives up. Furthermore, our music is not the issue. The music is good. The term has been subtly changed, which is the issue. We reduced a phrase that meant to fall on your face in front of a monarch to a few minutes of Sunday morning singing at some point. We relinquished the weight of the word, but Wycliffe kept it. This is the question that ought to put an end to all of us. What were the apostles if proskuno is the real term for worship? Genuinely engaging in worship? What did the original writers of this word imply by it? And why did it knock them to the ground every time? That's precisely where we're heading. The literal image of proskuneo is kissed in the direction of falling. Imagine the first scene of the Jewish Testament. Wise men chase a star over borders and deserts for months. According to the Bible, they fell to their knees and worshipped the young Jesus when they eventually arrived at his home. That term, to fall down on your face and bow down in front of someone far more powerful than you. This isn't an emotion, it is a position. This word always refers to a body in the Gospels. The head falls, the legs bend, and the face comes into contact with the ground. Jesus felt defeated when the leper approached him and pleaded to be cleansed.
The woman, who had been bleeding for years, trembled and fell to the ground when she finally touched him. Proskunuo is the term that keeps coming up. When you see Jesus for who he truly is, and your only sincere reaction is to go down, not to perform, not to impress, but just to surrender, that is worship in its purest form. However, whence did this stance originate? Why, long before the apostles wrote a word, was kneeling the language of worship? We need to go far farther back for that. King David took up his pen and penned these long before a single page of the New Testament was written.
Phrases. Come on, let's bow down and worship. Before the Lord, our Creator, let us bow down. And once more, the word worship has equal weight. The word shaka in Hebrew means to bend low, which is exactly what proskuneo means in chapter 2. Christian worship songs. Prostrate yourself, to press your face to the earth. Therefore, the next item we need to look at is the actual source of this position. It originates from the throne.
Space. This was not at all a religious gesture in antiquity. It had to do with politics. He did not stand and converse when a subject appeared before a king who possessed the power of life and death. He collapsed on the floor. He buried his face in the dust. It was the body's way of saying, think about the ruler, and I am yours. When the Israelites worshiped their God, they were not
Playing a nice tune for him. They were adopting the posture of an emperor who had the power to end your life with a single word, which was the most extreme expression of surrender in their culture, and the living God was receiving it from them. You alone are king, they said. My life is in your hands. I bow. This is the pulse that the contemporary concept of worship has lost. We have transformed the position of a subject in front of a monarch into that of a consumer in front of a product. We come to feel, to receive, to be taken care of. However, the Bible's call to worship starts in awe and submission on the ground. And a startling debate emerges if worshiping a king is equivalent to bowing. When the king eventually descends from heaven and appears before a common lady beside a well, what will happen to all of this? A woman walks to a well by herself during the warmest portion of the day. Because of her reputation as an outsider among her own people, she arrives at midday rather than in the cool of the morning with the rest. Their staircases are too much for her to handle. And waiting there, tired from the road, is Jesus. What starts out as a straightforward plea for water develops into one of the most significant discussions about worship ever documented. The "Our fathers," woman says to him, "worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews say that Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship." And here is the fourth thing we have to understand. She's posing the incorrect query. She is interested in geography. Which mountain? Which structure? Which address is God's favorite? Her people and the Jews have been at odds over where to meet God on the map for ages. Even now, we still ask her question, despite the fact that the wording have changed. Which church's worship is better? Which space, which band, and which approach brings God closer? We continue to stand at her well, pointing to mountains, confident that God's presence would eventually be shown in the appropriate location. However, see what Jesus does. He doesn't pick sides. He does not respect Jerusalem's mountain or defend it. Rather, he makes a statement that subtly undermines the entire argument. I assure you, woman, that the time will come when you will no longer worship the Father in Jerusalem or on this mountain. He states in one line that the entire argument is going to be out of date. Which location was never the question. Which building was never the question. Now that something much bigger than a temple stood in front of her, worship was never supposed to be restricted to any one place at all. Moreover, then Jesus tells her that true worship will occur in spirit and in truth. But what on earth does that actually mean? That's the question we open next. Jesus states clearly, "The hour is coming, and now is the time when the true worshipers will worship the Father in truth and spirit." Because the Father wants these people to worship Him. Those who worship God must worship Him in both spirit and truth, because He is spirit. This is the fifth item, and it marks the pivotal moment in all of this. These words have become softer over the course of 2,000 years, that their sharp edges have nearly vanished. When we hear these, most of us assume that Jesus is just saying, "Worship sincerely,"